Okay, Bill, have you got us as well?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good. All right, well, before we resume then, Mr. Scott asked for a moment on, to offer remarks on where we are so far.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments on what I see going on here. We obviously have a budget issue we're trying to solve, and we've got a public perception issue, which I hope we can solve too. Sheriff, I saw your Facebook post. I read all the 300 plus comments that are online from everybody from the community. I also listened to your comments on Tillamook Today, which was yesterday, and we're very faithful. It's on there also. You know, we're living in an age where you get these defund police campaigns and a general lack of support for police enforcement, law enforcement. You're also, and that's coupled with a 3.4% unemployment rate nationally, which is the lowest in 50 years. But you got to deal with that. And then I read in the Oregonian on Monday the backlog they have at the Oregon State Police Academy. You get a guy hired, you may have to wait 6 months before you can even get into the academy, and it's a 16-week program. You hire a guy today, you may not get him online for a year. So, you know, we have to figure out how to make this budget work. But I do think it's also extremely important that the community has to get behind this effort and how important the Sheriff's Department is. I believe it's punch because all 6 of those positions that we have to pay for, that's a problem. But that's a lot of effort, and you're competing against all other agencies, as you mentioned. You know, I was mayor of Manzanita for 6 years. We had a small police department up there. It was a lot of work to keep those 4 officers supported by the community, felt that they were needed and wanted to stay and work with us. And I know that's your job. I mean, you got to hire them, you got to retain them. It's a big project. So, you know, and I know recently the Rockaway disbanded their police department, which was a similar size to Manzanita's, and now they're paying you, and you're supposed to provide that support. And I know you're still struggling to get that up to speed. And a decision like that, if they wanted to decide that didn't work, and they want to go back and build their police department again, that's an impossible task once you've done that. So you got all that in front of you. I hope we can put our heads together here this afternoon and figure out a way to satisfy the budget and still somehow support you in trying to recruit these guys. So I'm open to any discussions we can have, but I don't think, it certainly wasn't my intent or anybody in the budget committee when in our earlier meetings that we were going to somehow look like we were banning Sheriff's Department. I mean, that's where we're going. We just, as I say, I think we got a perception issue now, we got a budget issue. So let's put our heads together and figure it out.
Do you mind if I actually respond, starting back with Mary Faith's comments?
Yeah, I was going to go back to Commissioner Bell. Did you finish your remarks, or did you have other, or where were we in that exchange when we got?
I'm good for now, until we get to the break.
All right, then go ahead, Sheriff.
So, first thing is you did talk about getting the approval for the positions again, and just, again, I want to make sure that that's clarified for everybody in this room. Prior to, or, you know, recently we stopped doing that, but when the open position needed to be refilled, like if somebody left or if you had an open position that was already budgeted for, we were supposed to come forward to the board with a requisition form and say, hey, we're trying to refill this position, and the board approved it. That portion went away recently, so to refill that, a position that was left empty, already budgeted for, that's what we're talking about. If a new position is created, and I think I did that either last year or the year before, where I actually asked to add a corrections technician or something to that effect, that rightfully so came before the board for approval because that was adding to my budget. So to refill positions, the need to get approval went away. The need to ask for positions that were not part of the budget still maintains to this day. And that, yes, that is absolutely correct. That's the way that is. You also had mentioned, you said that I'd been promised these positions were given back to me. I don't know who you're under the impression promised me that these positions would be given back, but I have never at any point been promised that these positions are guaranteed to come back or a promise has been made. Had I been promised and I was able to hold somebody to that promise, we would be having a different conversation, without a doubt. You also asked about recruits and how that's affecting recruiting. So I had to confirm with Under Sheriff Kelly because he's the primary contact for all recruiting for the whole office, even though we have individual divisions. And he did tell me that recruits are calling and asking if there's still gonna be a job available for them. So recruits are already aware of this and they're already concerned, so my fingers are crossed that we don't lose them because of panic. And again, my hope is that, well, we know what my hope is. Also, while we're on the subject of recruits, we just offered or extended an offer to 2 people, one for patrol, one for corrections division. They have accepted. They did it through the sheriff's interview, and the paperwork was just the final detail to it. They start June 1st, okay? So those 2 are additions to our office starting June 1st. We still have 5 people that are in various stages of the background check, okay? We have 4 of those that are, or out of those 5, 2 of those positions are the positions that are being proposed in this these 6 positions that are being proposed to be removed from our budget. So immediately, if all 5 of these come through, immediately I'm gonna need that money released because they are part of that 6. So rightfully concerned, they're calling the undersheriff trying to find out if the job's even gonna be available for them. So I believe that touches a little bit on what you're saying when it comes to recruitment. You know, it's difficult, we're competing for people. We have 5 in background that everything is looking very good at this point, and 2 of those positions would not be available starting July 1 if this budget passes. So that clarifies that. To clarify Rockaway, there are multiple citizens that wish things would go back to the way they were with their Rockaway police force because it was comfortable for them. There are citizens that absolutely love our presence there and love that they have the entirety of the sheriff's office available to them to cover their city. They recently had a new mayor elected, and so Under Sheriff Kelly has had numerous conversations with them. There's been discussions about whether they want to do that or not. They are not paying us for deputies that are not working. We have 2 deputies that are assigned to them. The contract is up to 4. Those 2 deputies cover Rockaway, and when they're not on duty, our other deputies cover Rockaway. So they have coverage constantly. It is not the same as what Rockaway Beach Police was. It's not the same exact type of service. It's different, and so there are some that don't like that. But to clarify, we are not being paid for positions we are not filling. Secondly, in the 3 or 3.25 positions on the patrol side, we only have 2 open positions that are general fund positions on our patrol side. The other 4 that are open are all contract positions. 2 are Rockaway, 1 is Marine, 1 is Forest. So if we remove 3 of them, I don't know what kind of proposal there is about the contract with ODF or Marine or Rockaway. Are we expected to go tell them, hey, sorry, we may not be able to fund your position because it's gone, and we have to go get approval? But that position is a contract position. It's not, but we're proposing to cut it. Cut 1 of them. I don't know which one we're thinking about. I don't know if that has been thought about, but we only have 2 general fund positions on our patrol side. So hopefully that addressed some of the things that you brought up.
Sean, could you address, I thought that the positions were not the contract positions, that there's a general fund.
They're all general fund in my mind.
Well, that was my exact understanding, same question she was asking.
Not true.
Regular general fund as opposed to contract, which do pay for themselves minus a small amount.
Plus a small amount. They pay for the benefit rate for every deputy that we have them work, plus 10% for administrative costs. Plus additional fees for technology, licensing, things of that nature, vehicles. So there's not actually any minus, it's plus.
I understood we could only bill for the hours they're actually on, so when they have vacation and those kind of things, that we weren't able to bill for that. Is that a correct assumption or understanding on my part?
Under Sheriff?
My understanding is that we can't bill for hours they're not on, so they do actually cost the general fund.
So they cost us for vacation days or sick days that they would not be working, that comes out of it.
Under Sheriff Kelly, is that correct?
That's correct. When they're not, the time they're working in those contract positions, we bill that agency for. But there is a 10%, a minimum of 10% admin fee that is built into contracts, and along with other benefits, that it comes out pretty dang close. I mean, it is gonna be pretty minimal either way. Plus or
And
minus.
so,
there are positions in addition to, I guess I need to make sure I understand, because I thought that I did and maybe I don't. That there were general fund positions and then there were contract positions that were on top of.
So what I use, they just all come out of the general fund. It's
Okay.
just what, my spreadsheet is, it copies over, it doesn't break out contract, which deputy's contract and which deputy is not for position.
Okay.
So in the proposed budget, we haven't actually identified which positions.
So how much then is revenue comes in offsetting revenue, but let's say the 6 point, whatever it is, let's just round it off, the 6 FTE, how many of those are outside the general fund and have offsetting revenue or close to almost offsetting revenue?
I would need to look that up and get that.
I think that's an important distinction, because my understanding originally was the 6, that was the 54 down to 48 or whatever it was, were all general fund, and then that money, the equivalent amount, the total amount was going into contingency, and then it had to be a process to go back. But now I'm hearing there's a distinction of other monies, and it's now a little more complicated than it was, so.
To further complicate as well, when we look on the jail side, although we don't receive special revenue funding of it, like for contracts or anything, Community Corrections does use a lot of their grant money. They're required by some of the benchmarks of that grant money. That is supposed to come over for programs, things of that nature, and Community Corrections does send a lot of that over, and if we have staffing issues over there and we're unable to complete a lot of those programs, the money that Community Corrections gets will end up going away because we can't meet the benchmarks. It's a domino effect. So although the $50,000 that gets sent over for, our Brighter Futures program, which is what we're proposing, does not necessarily and directly pay for a deputy, but if we don't have the staff to help run the programs, that money goes away, she loses grant money. JRI is one of the specific ones. Commissioner Yamamoto, you had mentioned that, and concern about using JRI funds. We lose deputies, we lose that money.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, please, go ahead.
so I'm sorry we got cut off there for a while, and Sheriff, I just have to tell you, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on both sides going on here. I was one of those commissioners that never thought we were cutting positions in the sheriff's office. We were moving that to contingency. And then you mentioned that you wanted a written guarantee. Even if those positions are in your budget, we cannot guarantee those funds. If something were to happen and we fall off a cliff and don't have money, even if you have those people in your budget, we would not be able to hire them. But in my mind, those 6 positions that we were considering taking out of your budget were never in jeopardy of not being hired by the sheriff's office. I just want to make that very clear to you. One other issue here is, oh God, it just went out of my head. So the contract positions we talked about, the recruits that you have, I'm hoping that, they're not involved in any of these conversations. And I'm sorry these conversations about removing and eliminating positions in the sheriff's office, I'm sorry that ever came up, because again, that was never my intention. But the Board of Commissioners does have and needs to have the authority. If something were to happen to our budget, even if we had 50 positions in the county that needed to be hired, if we fell off a financial cliff, even though they're in the budget, we just can't do that. So the one issue that came up, and Commissioner Bell, you mentioned this, and this could change my position completely here. So you mentioned that if positions are not budgeted, then we can't recruit. That's the first time I have ever heard that before, and I would need some clarification there.
Shall I respond?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, if Jody Wilson is on, she can jump on, but I in a meeting I had with Jody on Monday, I confirmed with her that if a position is not budgeted, we can't recruit for it. It has to be, the position has to be in the budget in order to start the recruitment process. So I asked Jody, if those positions are not in the budget, how on earth would we recruit? And she said, well, we couldn't. we couldn't exactly, we could just do something general, like tell people, if you're ever interested in working for the sheriff's office, we'd like to have your information, but they have to be in the budget to recruit for them.
I think Jody just talked about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
speak to
I
that.
think there's kind of two paths here. When we have a position to fill, and let's just say that, financial something happened that created an inability for us to fill a position at the moment. Those recruits would be put on a hiring list and be eligible to be pulled from that hiring list as soon as a position is available. We the ability to recruit positions that are not in the budget. But generally what we look at is our budgeted positions. If there is a vacancy, we pull from those vacancies and fill. By board order or Board of Commissioners authorization, or even a liaison, we can recruit for things that are not in the budget. That usually requires 3 signatures. That's the treasurer, that there is funds available for those positions, and the liaison. I think there might have been a misunderstanding in those 2 separate pieces. And since I was asked to come on this line, I am very concerned about these recruits. Tillamook County is a wonderful place to work. And we are really excited to have these deputies come on board. And I also hope that they're not part of these conversations, because they're great candidates. We're really happy to have them. We've got great work for them. And as we work through the budget, I feel like this is a very separate conversation for these individuals. And again, I couldn't wait for them to get here if we have a place for them.
Jody, thanks so much for that clarification. I do absolutely agree with you. This conversation should never have happened. We haven't even adopted the budget yet. So this is premature, and I think it is having some unintended consequences. So thank you for that, Jody.
Is there any more follow-up on this conversation before I sign back off?
But you might want to wait. I think former Commissioner Bartline had a question. He had 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's really not a question, it's how you would do it budgetarily. If the sheriff came in and wanted to take the money out of contingency for a new position he knew he was going to need immediately, the county treasurer could transfer that money into a new position in his funds, so the funds would be available and immediately used. So it's not like you can't do it, but there's a couple steps you have to do to make it happen.
To oversimplify, it's like transferring money to a savings account
Right.
to fill the position.
So is
I'd like
is
to-
it really that simple?
No.
And I'm also concerned, one of my questions I was gonna ask, I'll ask now. If this has changed back to where, and I don't know where it would end up, are we doing something different for each department, or should we not treat every general fund department the same?
It should be every general fund department. Most of the general fund departments have reached their minimum FTE. We do not have open positions. But I did this budget proposal as a way to bring the problem of what's going to happen in the future. Where you would like the money, I'm more than happy to move wherever. It's numbers on paper. My apologies, Sheriff Brown. Matt had been ecstatic about the recruitments, and I was ecstatic for him. So I hope they go through.
So
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead. Sheriff.
We've just discussed about a lot of the steps it would take and being able to recruit positions, and there's a couple extra steps, and you could actually just simply move the money back into my budget. But back to Commissioner Bell's point, why do that with positions and risk losing potential candidates because they fear not having a position when there's $1.8 million available to do the same thing?
Yes, it is.
I think that is a viable solution. It is a legitimate question. Why can't the $1.8 million that is unable to be used, and you don't have plans for a court annex yet. You don't have engineering, you're not ready to do this. Why can't those $1.8 million be put into there and you guys pull those money out? You need them.
Absolutely.
Why do we have to sacrifice positions?
Well, let's turn to Rachel for a moment. Could you speak to that project? All right.
Sounds good.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I think that is a question.
The process, and where you are in the annex, and so we all need to know that timelines and what you know, recognizing that's today, could be something more.
So just brief way of context, this is not, it's not a siloed, we're building the meeting room for the commissioners. It's part of a larger project that dates decades, former sheriffs and the judges, and were required by the state to provide adequate court facilities. So this started with, so the money that we're talking about that's in the building improvement fund begins with 1.1 roughly $1 million from land sales that occurred 2015, 2016, where we sold the properties to the Grand Ronde tribe in an effort to build a complete court facility out of the jail, which was contemplated when the jail was built back in the 90s, which was $18 million at that time and didn't proceed. And so when former Commissioner Laphart was here, Betsy Johnson, Paul Levesque, and others worked on this process to get that done. And so developed this funding strategy. Properties were sold, but it was too much. The general fund could not pick up the balance to build, even along with a 50% match from the state, which is very generous, could not build that facility out at Long Prairie. Long story short, lots of iterations later, we were looking at doing, in my tenure here, an annex on the south lawn, which ironically was about a $5 million project at that time, that we were about $1 million short, where Commissioner Bartline was on the board at that time. David was elected and had not started his term yet. The board made the decision, we cannot come up with another $1 million to do the reduced south annex, which at that time was going to be part of circuit court. It was just going to be one courtroom and a few offices to support the supporting staff. So the project stopped. We withdrew from any state funding at that point, which we had a high likelihood of getting to the legislature. And the $1.1 million went into the building improvement fund, and it sat there with the intent by the board to honor what we needed to do, which was improve safety, court security. This used to be the former courtroom, which was 108. ADA access, Sally Port, lots of other security improvements. It wasn't a meeting room for the Board of Commissioners. So that money sat there, and because it wasn't enough to do any final solution, the board at the time made the commitment to circuit court to deposit at least $250,000 a year, and so the pot was growing. Now it's 1.8. Last year, we all worked together again with the state to try to make another go at the solution, and the solution is the one that we're in the middle of, which is 3 phases. The first of which being a courthouse remodel, where the Board of Commissioners gave up meeting room A and B, and we remodeled this and spaces downstairs for grand jury. So that is why we're in this very small temporary meeting room. Phase 2 is the annex, which moves the Board of Commissioners out into a new space that's either on the south lawn or over by the museum, on the Eastern Museum lawn, with a larger meeting room and BOC offices. Then that frees us up to come back to the courthouse and do seismic upgrades, maybe bring community development back, ADA, Sally Port, and all of the other things that circuit court still needs here, as well as other county staff. So I do have the RFP written. It is ready to go. We're hoping to get $1 million from the state to contribute to this. And it stalled because of budgets, and we need an annex. That stalled months ago before we were where we are right now. So the money originated from land sales. It has received, so it wasn't general fund originally, but it's received the difference, the $700,000 over the last couple of years in general fund transfers, that is true. And it is ready to proceed with an annex solution and then ultimately more money from the state to come back and do improvements in the courthouse. So that's where we are. Can we use the money for whatever we want to use it for? Absolutely. I am here to do whatever projects you need me to do. We are also on the way with the countywide facilities assessment, which includes the sheriff's office, jail, all the other county offsite departments, including the courthouse. We've completed a seismic study, which identifies some actually would be reasonable projects that we could do, reasonable being a couple of $1 million, not $44 million that prior study showed. We do have a lot of needs for facilities countywide, including the courthouse, which are in part security and circuit court related, as well as it would be a benefit to the sheriff's office with the Sally Port and so on. But it's up to the budget committee and the board's discretion on how you want to spend the money. There are no technical strings to the $1.8 million. The 1.1 was, I would say, earmarked from when the land sales were sold, and there was a verbal commitment to circuit court that we would be transferring money and building a pot to do a solution, but that's where we are. But there, you have discretion and flexibility to shift.
And so Rachel, I know Bill had his hand up first, but I just need to add just a little bit to your story, if I may. So we've already refused money from the state for courthouse work once before. And when we did that, that raised the ire of a lot of counties throughout the state. Going back a second time for what we called an annex. Rachel and I went to Salem a couple times and really made a great case. And we weren't sure whether because we refused money once already, we would even be eligible for a second shot at courtroom development, courthouse development funds. We were very fortunate. I think we made a very strong case, and we got authorized the $1.1 million from the state again. My cautionary tale here is that if we for now a second time tell the state that we're not going to take your money, I'm not sure we're going to have a third chance at this moving into the future. So I just want to put that out there. So Rachel, thank you so much for all the work you've done on this. It's been a trial. It has been. Thank you.
Can ARPA and TLT be used for your match? There's 1.8 million of ARPA and potential TLT in that annex budget.
TLT cannot be used if we do the south lawn, which would just be, and all this is conceptual,
right.
Would be a one-story meeting room with VOC offices, which frees up that space upstairs for circuit court. The concept for the museum would be, the ground floor would be the VOC and offices and space for the meeting room, and then the top floor would be museum, which could be used for TLT, but it's a two-story building at that point, so it doesn't really help with the bottom line. And then the
But
match,
in
ARPA could be, but there isn't that much in ARPA that's available.
Well, I'm just reading on the actual annex budget line down at the very bottom. It says annex revenues. It says 995,000 from ARPA and from TLT, but it's to be determined another 900,000. So if you need 1.8 million dollars to match in order to get the state grant, there it is.
No, so the project a year ago, estimating
Okay.
4.7 includes 1 million ARPA already. That's part of the package.
Right.
Plus the 1.8, which we have sitting in the fund, the 900 for TLT if we're over there, and then the 1 million for state. So it's a funding package, which we already have 1 million that the board's approved for ARPA.
I guess I'm asking if there's other sources of revenue that can be used to match so that you don't have to turn down the state grant.
So the state money doesn't require match.
Oh. So
Then
you'll
why would
lose
we
it.
be turning it down?
Only if we can't use it, so the state
Yeah.
1 million.
How long do you have to use
It's
it?
not a match requirement.
You have 2 years, you have a biennium
Okay.
to use it.
Well, there you go.
Okay, Bill, you have something that I want
But
to.
just to comment on that,
Okay.
he does make a good point that in trying to further this, there is the $1 million of ARPA money sitting that we could, if you wanted to do the annex or keep pursuing that, we have 1 million cash to do that this year. The 1.8 is still gone for building later, but for cash flow consideration, 1 million is there.
Well, Bill, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and ask a question, then I want to ask a general question here of the six of us, so go ahead.
So I've got a couple things. One, on the first annex, I think the $9 million match, and we were going to build the building out at the port, and it was going to be 18 million. And I couldn't talk the other two commissioners into going out to ask the voters to put a serial levy in to pay for it. So it died. The museum definitely needs some storage space for all of our artifacts. We're losing the place where we have been storing them. They're booting us out, so we're going to need that. But my main question is to go back to Josh. Exactly how many positions, new positions, are you looking at? I mean, what from last year? I think we were at, what, 41 last year or thereabout? What would be the
So I
ideal-
don't know those exact numbers, but what I can say is if we hire the remaining 5 that we have in background plus the 2 we just hired, under sheriff, are we at 5 left? 4?
Yeah, we're gonna still have 5 on criminal and
And we'd be full on corrections, so we'd
Not
have
quite.
5 open positions left.
Okay, if you make all those hires, how many of those remaining 5 would be for city patrol? Are those,
What?
in other
For
words, would you
contracts?
be getting reimbursed on any of those other 5?
That I don't know yet, because as Mr. Scott pointed out, it takes a lot of years to get them through training and stuff. So until we actually get them trained and determine that, and they can actually count as somebody and not be trained, I don't know the answer to that yet.
Okay. And realistically, out of those 12 spots, basically, how many do you actually believe you can actually get filled this year? Do you think you can fill all 12? Because last year that was, the
I
reason
don't
we
think
left
it's- I
them
think
last
if you're-
year is exactly your argument this year, is that once they're gone, they're gone. But
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so my question is, realistically, how many can you fill? Because that's always been my contention, is when you don't budget actual and you come in a lot less, and you know you're gonna come in less, that hurts all the other departments, and that hurts, we saw that in IS, when we couldn't budget enough to do the proper security, and we got nailed with that virus, because we had a lot of unspent money in different departments. So I guess my question is, realistically, if you really had a crystal ball, do you think you can get all 12?
Well, there's not 12 openings, there was 11 at the beginning of this year, because,
Okay.
and the 12th that I think you're speaking of is special revenue from parole and probation. So that's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2, we've already, I mean, by the time we go through this background process, and when you say this year, do you mean fiscal year? Because
Next fiscal year, the upcoming budget.
the upcoming budget year, I mean, if you actually ask me straight out, and we're looking at the momentum that we had from that prior one, and if those positions are available and we continue our messaging, I think it's possible to fill every one of them.
Absolutely.
Yes, right. We need to,
That something has turned. We have not seen 12 or 11 or 12 qualified candidates. And keep in mind, the 11 or 12 that we got out of it, there was an additional 5 or 6 that missed the post test by a couple of questions or missed the ORPAT by a few seconds. So they would have been additional candidates. We had people trying. If this momentum continues, I don't foresee an issue filling them all. Now, will that actually happen? I don't know. But if you're going to ask me what my opinion is based on the facts that are in front of me, the momentum, the conversations, etc., that's my opinion.
And
Okay, so
union
that
agrees
could-
with them.
That puts a little different spin on it, because in the past, those were unfilled positions that went into that should have went into contingency.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did the money
you've
not
got
go? Oh, sorry. I cut
Okay.
you off.
So that was my question.
Okay, so
Thank you.
let me ask a bigger, see if we can cut to the chase here. Is there anybody on this committee of 6 who wants to cut 6 positions from the sheriff's office? Forget about where the money and all of that. Is there anybody of the 6 of us who thinks that we can get by with 6 or fewer cops that we have now?
I think to clarify, it's not 6 or fewer than we have now. So I think that's a narrative that has to be super clear, and I think that's
But the
because
union has to
So-
talk to that narrative.
So,
Okay, hold one at a time here. And
So-
I think I did misspeak.
so I want to be super clear. I would love to have all 11 positions filled and have them on our streets. And has been pointed at me with my name specifically called out in the Facebook post. So I would like to take a minute to address, because it was never intended to be personal until it was made personal through the post. So I want to go back and I want to talk about the
How did I make it personal?
by saying that Aaron and Sean have called this out. And if you read the comments, they fell onto us, and the nasty emails and phone messages, frankly, I have received personally. So to be clear, a process was created to look at what past spending existed. We have, as a county, over budgeted excessively between $1 and $3 million over the last 8 years. And it's not just the sheriff's department, it's all departments. We come to the end of each year with money that is unspent because department heads have things in their budget that they're not spending. And as we are looking at how we can be fiscally responsible, it is incumbent upon us to create a budget that is closer to reality. Now, the fact that the sheriff's department had personnel that they were unspent is simply how it landed in the formula. And that is where Sean and Deborah began, is simply with a formula that said, what is the average unspent in the last 5 years? And let's pull that out and take a closer look at it. And let's really determine what of that is realistic spending. What are we actually going to get to? And then they went back and looked at facts. And facts included that we had 11 unfilled positions for 3 years. Facts included that if you go back all the way to 2000, it's in here, go back to 14, 15, there has never been more than 46 positions hired in the sheriff's department, even though there's always been more than that budgeted. So the facts didn't hold up to let's fully fund everything for everyone, right? The facts didn't hold up to it. So what I want people to recognize is there was never a target on the sheriff's back. That was never the intention of this. It was a fact-based model to look at. I'm really sorry that this is where we have all ended up. It was certainly not the intention. I really wish, Sheriff, you and I could have sat down and just had a conversation. Okay, and let's see if we can move forward from here. No one wants less, but we also don't want the amount of contention that was created by taking to Facebook to try to solve this rather than coming to a committee of people who was going to make the decision to solve this.
We want to be involved.
And that's wonderful, but to act as if something had been decided and done that had not, created a very big
just
stir.
end it then.
Okay, so let me go back.
Excuse me, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let me ask the question again, and I'll try and say it different. Is there any one of the 6 of us who wants to see fewer cops in Tillamook County? So then we're not talking about fewer cops, we're talking about the process and the budget, and where do we hold the money, and how is it moved around from here to there. So the issue of cops on the street is not an issue in my mind. Everybody here agrees on that. Am I correct, Commissioner Yamamoto and Bill and others? We all want to see as many cops as we can. Nobody wants to cut cops. What we have to figure out is where should the money be and what's the process to get it from here to there? How do you get these people on a payroll? And if you can come up with 11 hires, good for all of us. Nobody loses. So what I'd like to do now, is, time is getting on. Some of you folks have been sitting here for a couple hours. I wonder if the committee would allow the sheriff to step aside and we could hear quickly from these other people who signed up, and there aren't a lot, there's like five or six, and have you come up, identify yourself into the record. I want to be sensitive to these people. I admire people who take an afternoon off to come up here and talk to their officials.
Commissioner Starr accused me of lying, and she accused me of attacking her. I want to make sure that I...
And all your friends on Facebook too.
Okay.
What exactly did I
Wait a
say?
minute here. We're going to talk one at a time. And right now I'm going to have the sheriff...
I appreciate everybody's support, but please allow the process to happen, okay?
As soon as the sheriff responds, Then I want to go to these people who signed up and anybody else, and I'll give you a couple of rules when you come up here. So we want to hear from you. Nobody in this room does not want to hear from you. So Sheriff, you respond, and then we'll take 30 seconds and have some people come up.
I don't even know if I need a response for this. I would ask that you would actually think about this instead of accusing me of blasting you or personally attacking you. I'd like to know what I said that was untrue, and I'd like to know what I said that actually personally attacked you. Is it not true that you and Sean worked together on the proposed budget, and you were the ones that actually pushed it forward? That's one question. Did I lie about that in any way, shape, or form? Number two, what did I say?
Sheriff,
What did I say?
Let's give her a chance to answer the questions one at a time.
So Sheriff, we were working on our proposed budget strategy that was not decided and not determined and not ready to go out and say into the public, this is what's happening. What's happening is what's happening here today.
Did I say anything that actually implied that the process was over?
You did.
What
It
did
was
I say?
interpreted. So you said
I'm not
6
actually gonna go back and
positions.
forth with you.
And I don't think it's
But
beneficial for any of us.
It was proposed that we lose 6.25 positions from the approved budget. I did not attack you and I did not lie to the public. And as the public said, they deserve to know because I work for them.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
You work for them.
Yep.
They
Yes.
deserve to know,
You work
not
for
be
us.
hidden in the shadows. Thank you.
Okay. All right, hang on just a second. I want those of you who signed up, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to do this. And I'm going to ask everybody's indulgence here just for a moment. Okay, to start with, when you come up, we want your name loud and clear into the record and what area you live in, not your address, but let's say you're North County, South County, Rockaway Beach, or whatever. Then second of all, somebody's going to time you here for 2 minutes. No more than 2 because we want everybody to have a few moments. And number 3, no personal attacks on any of us or any others or the sheriff or anybody else. This is a public policy discussion. I'm not going to call people names, and if you are, I'm going to stop the meeting and ask somebody to escort you to the front door. Number 4, if somebody has said whatever he or she says, and you're going to say the same thing, I would appreciate your saying, I agree with the previous speaker, and that way we can get through this maybe a little more timely. And I know some of you probably have family, home, and dinners, and we want to be respectful of that. Number 3, please no clapping and yelling. Let somebody be heard. Let those who are on remote hear it, and let's keep those things to a minimum. And then I want to say one thing about the 3 elected commissioners. Not too long ago, they proposed a business license in unincorporated Tillamook County, and they had some rationale for it, and they started putting the word out, and they engaged some other people from economic development, to go out and spread the word. And they got terrific pushback on that. Probably one of the hardest said, this is a piece of crap. And basically, they came to their meeting, they came to a chamber meeting that I was at in South County, and they got the message loud and clear, and they withdrew it, and they've suspended it indefinitely. And the reason I'm telling you that is, nobody has a made-up mind here yet. So don't think these people are trying to ram something through on you, because I don't think they are. My personal opinion. So that's my 2 cents on this. So the first one is Donna Sheldon. Would Donna Sheldon or?
Commissioner, may I interrupt? This young lady's trying to get to a meeting. She desperately needs to get
Well, if
spoken
you,
out.
okay, you want to go out of order, that would be
Sure,
April, I
that's
believe,
fine.
April Bailey. Yes, we'll give you your, and as I said, please identify yourself, and then we'll be happy to hear you for a couple minutes. Now, who's timing and can give her the high side of this? 2 minutes, and if you just, and we appreciate it, and wrap it up, and we get everybody, and we only have 5 minutes, so I think we can do this.
Yes, I'm April Bailey. I live in South County. I'm going to keep it short. Obviously, you have budget challenges. We all understand that. I'm going to point out that, frankly, in my opinion, and in a lot of voters' opinions, there's a lot of money spent in this from this office, from the commissioners, that is unnecessary. Let me bring out one item. $38,000 on a survey of your county employees to discuss the working, so you can find out the working environment. I understand you don't work with all these people every day. I think that's a good amount of money if you ask me. There are multiple county employees that go to meetings all over the country. And one time Sean even had to intervene and say, I don't know if we need to spend that much on that meeting for somebody. $120,000 to a global funding contractor to write our homeless plan with people you meet with all the time. The list could go on. I remember there was a health department one where we wanted to make it more inviting to LGBTQ people. I'm sure LGBTQ people are very welcome in the health department. I know some of this maybe come from state grants, but honestly, state grants are our tax money as well. And I would like to point out, as far as an annex, yeah, you guys have ARPA funds that you had designated for that, and I appreciate if you use those, not any other contingency funds. Finally, I just want to say to you, as someone who you see quite often in this room, I live in South County. We're unincorporated. We have to have our sheriff's department. We do not have enough officers in Pacific City. We have a lot of crime issues that are not being addressed. They don't have enough officers to cover it. They're trying to do their best. And to be honest with you, I have heard, especially one commissioner, nickel and dime our sheriff, to be honest with you, even when he's presented grant items that were covered under grants. And it's happened on more than one occasion. And I'm not sure what the problem is, but to be very clear, we do not want any positions cuts. We want all the positions filled that he has had in the past designated to him. And we want more police, and public safety is first to the voters, okay? Public safety, and yes, we would like the roads taken care of as well. And I'm going to leave. I have school board members to take care of.
All right, next would be Donna Sheldon.
I'm not used to public speaking, so if my voice wavers, please ignore it. First of all, as the mother of a Tillamook County Sheriff's deputy who recently retired after 26 years, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. So let's weigh this out. I've left a lot of this other stuff out because Sheriff Josh Brown spoke to a lot of it. So, A, lose 6 deputies, thereby putting the public at risk, especially at a time when Title 42 is about to end, and make the current flood of people coming across our southern border look like a mere trickle. In addition, these deputies lose their paychecks, which they need to put food on the table for their families. Or B, build a $4.6 million courthouse annex to house new modern offices for BOCC's elected members and staff, and also include a new, larger meeting room. Which one's more important? You people were elected to the public's best, to put the public's best interest first. This means safety, not nice, new, cushy offices. You were voted in, and you can be voted out. Police officers leave home every day, my son was one of them, not knowing if they will come home at night. He had his whole family told that this guy told my son that he knew where my granddaughter worked, knew that she drove his pickup, knew where to find all of us, and that he was going to put a stent in my son's neck. Now, I want you to remember all of that when you get ready to make your decision. Every day they have to deal with the...
So wrap it up, please.
Thank you. Every day they have to deal with the worst situations imaginable. They're not asking for cushy offices and fancy meeting rooms. They are just asking for respect and to be able to keep their jobs. The people of this county have had enough. We're taxed to death, and we have lost patience with elected officials putting new offices and meeting rooms ahead of public safety. Bottom line, let the sheriff do his job. He is the best sheriff we have had in years. He knows what he's doing. His officers respect him and enjoy working with him. Being 17% under budget is a good thing. You would do well to learn from him. Borrowing from Peter to pay Paul is not good money management. Keep your hands off his budget. Thank you.
Okay, just 3 more. Tiffany Jacob.
She had to leave.
She had to leave. Okay. All right, Al Johnson.
Thank you for your time. My name's Al Johnson. I live just east of town, everybody in Tillamook. From everything that I've heard, it would seem to me that, and then you talk about contingencies, I think there should be a guarantee rather than contingencies, because that doesn't give Sheriff Brown any incentive to move forward, knowing that that might be taken away from him. I think something needs to be fixed with this to guarantee that as many officers as he needs to provide the safety to this community that he's trying to do. It needs to be in concrete that he can have those funds to do that. And along with that, as Sheldon had just explained, these officers not only provide safety for us in the community, but they're stepping into harm's way every day. And I believe it takes a special person to want to be a police officer and to provide the services that they do. And they talk about where the community, where the officers, it must grow within the sheriff's department, because there's going to be losses because of stress, lack of pay maybe, but more importantly, burnout on a job, especially if they're required to do a lot of additional overtime hours. It takes away from their family and puts them in jeopardy. Plus, I also believe that by doing the overtime hours, they're not as sharp at 11 o'clock at night as they were at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I fully believe that they should be funded. No ifs, ands, or buts, and that's enough out of me. Thank you.
All right, last one is Corinne Trowbridge.
It's Corinne.
Corinne, I'm sorry, Corinne.
Okay. I am Corinne Trowbridge. I am the president of Local 223. I represent your deputies. I will not adhere to a 2-minute. I have things that you need to hear, and I will try.
You're the last one, so we gave another 2 minutes, but so go ahead.
Thank you. I understand that in concept, you're not trying to get rid of officers. I understand that. But I don't think that you understand the process that's in play, nor do you understand the relationship between the union and the sheriff's office. Our local and the Teamsters have worked in harmony with the sheriff's office for many years. Your deputies have been Teamsters for over 20 years. What does that mean to you? What it means is the first thing that is going to change the minute this proposal would happen if it passed. You have part-time officers that are working in the jail to offset the fact that you do not have enough deputies. We will eradicate part-time work until you fill all full-time positions if this were to pass. Which means you would have to fill all positions in the jail. You would probably have to pull deputies off of patrol to do that. You have 3 areas where you have to fill, they're mandated. Patrol is not one of them. So the general population is looking at, right now you have 2 officers out a night for the entire county. They would be looking at much less than that. Those are numbers that really are what is happening out there. I don't care who proposed the bill or any of that. I understand that you guys have a budget issue. You've had the same budget issue for years. We were discussing timber years ago. We've discussed it for the last 3 contracts, guys. So right now it's let's hit 10% out of the sheriffs. Come on, that's not gonna work. So I do want to tell an incident before I go into the rest of my things. You had 2 deputies out 4 weeks ago. One was in Nesquehoin, am I saying that right? Nesquehoin. And the other one was here, Tillamook proper. The Nesquehoin is 30 minutes away, I believe is what I was told. Deputy Ross responded to a call. He was in pursuit of possible perpetrator. That could have ended in an altercation. The other officer was 30 minutes away and there was no backup. And the other agencies that you guys think are coming into play, City of Tillamook didn't offer any help. None whatsoever. Didn't even check in to see if he was okay. So what I want to say is that he could have been shot and he would have been left to bleed out because 30 minutes was before anybody could get to him. And if he couldn't have radioed in for his own help, he would have been down an officer. Now, that's not an extreme. Our local has 30% law enforcement. We do this. This is our job. This is what we deal with all the time. The fact that you guys are running so close to the line right now is a safety grievance. The reason that we don't have a safety grievance on the books yet is because we've been working with the sheriff's office to try and get your staffing up in two very distinct areas. First, patrol. You need more people out there. You're about to hit the summer season where you have tourists left and right. You don't have enough now, let alone if you were to put it into the contingency. And let's just be real, people. You put it in a contingency, when the money's moved, the money's spent. And unless the union were to get something in writing guaranteeing that the minute the sheriff's department said, we've got 3 people that are coming in, the money gets moved over, that would be considered to us a safety grievance. Next is the jail. Do you know what's happening in the jail? I need my water. I'm not going to be able to do this. I apologize. Thank you, Ann. Thank you. The jail has been running so many overtime hours. Your staff is so involved, and that's why you've lost the last 2. So what did we do? Josh, thank God, sat down with everybody and said, let's try it. Let's do a 12-hour shift. Let's move to a 12-hour shift. Let's see if it'll work. They were willing to try it. What that meant is they were going to put in some more overtime to get it started, but hopefully, because we had these open positions, because the recruiting was getting better, because we had so many people showing up, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. If you move these positions, you're going to dash that light.
The whole system.
And they're not going to be. It's not going to work. We're going to have to go back to the other way. The overtime hours alone are costing you so much money, and your staff is at burn-out levels. They're done, guys. And these are my people. I'm here to protect them. Your budget is your budget. I mean, I have my own opinions, but nobody needs to hear that, right? I'm here for the members. Patrol alone is already at a safety grievance. So you have my word that if we move to this, the next steps for the union would have to be, I have no choice, because my members would force me to file the safety grievance. And the only reason they haven't done it yet is because we're working together in a partnership. This does not feel like a partnership. Nobody came to me and said, hey, this is what we're thinking about. Does the union have an opinion? Does the union have any information? You guys spoke about it's fact-based. You don't have all the facts. You didn't know what I just said, I don't think. Some of you were told, but I don't know that you really listened or understood what that meant in the consequences. As far as personal attack, Erin, I read that. I didn't consider that a personal attack. I adore Sean. She knows that. She does excellent work. So I don't know all of that, but I do know that my members deserve to be taken care of. And this is not taking care of them. When Sean said make the invisible visible, that's what I'm trying to do here, is show you that the only reason the jail is functioning is because of those part-time staff and the 12-hour shifts. Those part-time staff will go away. We have that right. We haven't used that right because we have always been able to say you have 11 positions that you are trying to fill. As long as you're trying to fill those, as long as I can see the open recruitment, as long as we are part of that open recruitment, on our website, we put up there, Tillamook County, we have, again, 30% law enforcement. People move to the beach. But if we go off of that, then I can't, then that's the way that I'm going to go. I think I've got it all.
You've got a little extra time.
Thank
Can I
you.
get you to make a final statement? Yeah.
Well, my final statement is this. I've worked with your sheriffs. Josh is doing an exemplary job. Now, I didn't know that when he was put in. We all had concerns. We didn't know what kind of sheriff he was going to be. But he's a good man, and he's a good sheriff. And your general population is behind him. And public safety should be number one. And this should not have been the place to start. If you had done all of this homework somewhere else, and you could show that to everybody, then maybe. But perception is everything, and the perception in your general public is that you're attacking the sheriff's office.
Yes.
That's perception, but that's all that matters, really, guys. But for us, the Teamsters are not behind this. We are the exact opposite. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay.
Oh, can I say one last thing? The 8 years, let's talk about those 8 years real quickly. You started with a hiring freeze 8 years ago. That had nothing to do with the sheriff's office. There was a hiring freeze. Then we hit COVID. Then we hit defund the police. And you guys are using those last 5 years as history that matters? Yeah, it matters, but it doesn't matter on what you can fill those positions. And the other part of that history, if you want to look at defunding the police or underfunding the police, look at Portland. Portland is a mess.
Yes.
And instead, they defunded their police, they underfunded their police, and now they're going the opposite because it is a nightmare. Our office, had to move out of Portland because the crime has gotten so bad. I do not want to see that happen here in Tillamook. And by the time that happens, it'll be too late. It's a slippery slope.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we've heard from the sheriff and all the people. Let me ask, is there anyone else wants to address this committee? Going once, going twice? Okay, thank you very much. As I said before, just speaking for myself, when people take the time to come and sit through an afternoon and what sometimes for a lot of people is extremely boring, and you did it, I admire that, so thank you very much. Okay, so now let me ask the committee, do we want now to take this up in earnest? Do you want to take another break? Do you want to focus on one part and flip over then to the special funds and get that out of the way, or what's your pleasure now? Be flexible here.
So I'm assuming we will not likely wrap, you have a 6 o'clock stop? Is that correct? 7 o'clock stop, oh, okay. Good. Never mind.
Okay, so maybe, okay, so what if we do this, then we're down to where we're deliberating now. We've heard from our public and we've heard from agencies, and I'm assuming that there are no others. You're saying you don't need to say anything correct, and I don't see any other department heads here. And we already heard from library. Oh, beg your pardon, yes.
I don't know that I don't have anything to add. If you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. I have the DA's office.
Do we have anything for Ms. Olson on the DA side? Must not have had a jury trial today. I was worried about parking, so you did good schedule. Okay, so let's do this, and let's talk about special funds. And I'll start with the treasurer and Rachel, because there's one fund that needs some attention. And there are other funds in the general, special funds that we need to take up in earnest and talk about in some detail. We know we do with the TLT.
Yeah, I can start there, Doug, and I think I can make it pretty quick. It is out of balance, currently 1.686 and some change. I've talked to Cammie at the fairgrounds. I briefly exchanged an email with Joanne at Parks, and I've talked to the Tillamook Coast, and I've been able to shave off several things. Most of the changes, I think, unless you want me to go into them, I don't necessarily need to. They're within the purview of the Board of Commissioners and the contracted services. But basically, we're looking at postponing a couple of the fairgrounds allocations and one of the parks project allocations. But the main point we discussed it for you because they are line items in 121, which affects the transfer to the parking management plan fund for the One Corridor project, is a reduction to visit Tillamook Coast for about $190,000. That's a consulting with Nan. And then the transfer for the Quan Corridor project by $776,000, almost $777,000, which,
Rachel, can you speak up please a little bit?
oh, sorry,
Thank you.
reducing the allocation in 121 that gets transferred to the Cape Wanda parking lots construction. We are looking at cost reductions. I don't know if that will offset any potential cost overruns because it's a very complicated project over the next year. We are hopeful that we're going to get $750,000 from the state, which would offset that, as well as the project is scheduled to be mostly done and ready for use by June of next year. But there will be some minor items that have to occur throughout the next month or two, and so final invoices that trickle in for the project are likely to be in the following fiscal year. So I feel confident that we can reduce the cost to TLT this coming fiscal year for the Quantum Corridor project. So those are two line item changes that would be different.
That would take it to the 1.6 or whatever.
That makes up the 1.7. Yeah.
Well, let me ask the committee then, do you
Good with
want,
that approach.
you want Rachel to go into some more detail on that, or are you comfortable that it will happen and finally go just before the Board of Commissioners and be corrected at the time they look at it in June?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, Commissioner Yamamoto, are you okay if that's, we don't go into detail now, but you'll revisit when it comes before you for adoption?
Yes, I've had several conversations with Rachel about that, so I'm good with what she's talking about.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Barline, or, yeah, I guess I'm still Port Commissioner. And I agree with Rachel. I actually think our beginning cash in 110 or 111 will be more than zero at year end. I think we're probably going to exceed the 5,500 we budgeted last year.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all good, you're good with that too? All right, then, well, thank you, Rachel. We'll say now then that the special funds are all in balance with the exception of 121 that needs to be dealt with before the end of the year, but it appears there's a path forward. So are we all good with special funds and all the way around? Okay. All right, so then let's go to what we have left, which is the general fund. And so let's forget the sheriff for a moment. Let's go to all the other general funds and ask if there are any issues there that we're not aware of that haven't been adjusted or shown in the budget that we received for today's meeting. Nothing that you know of that's outstanding. Nobody's come to your door or called you late at night or whatever. Okay.
I haven't had anybody come down and talk to me.
So I guess no news is good news.
Well, I think there's a question to that, because perhaps people are not aware as at the level the sheriff is aware. So I guess I want to learn from what we've done here today and find out if other department heads have reviewed their budget and are clear that there are items in contingency. The fact that no one's come to visit you, the sheriff didn't come to visit you either. So what I'm suggesting is perhaps department heads overall didn't realize that was the step they needed to take. I just want to make sure that we don't end up in that space with other departments coming back in our next meeting, so.
I'd like to speak to that, sure. I mean, this is Aubrey Olson.
Please identify yourself.
Aubrey Olson, District Attorney. I did review mine. I was aware that there would likely be items put into contingency as we discussed when I presented my budget, specifically some of the witness fees for our upcoming prosecutions. That was pretty clear to me, and I was not surprised at all, and that's what I expect. And it's my understanding that when I go to prosecute these cases and we actually have trial and I need to bring these people, it's, I'm going to do it and say, Sean, I need the money. That's how I understand it to work.
Thank you.
So are we, Sean, is the general fund, all the departments being treated the same?
I have to go back and dig further.
Well, as a general statement, forgetting the sheriff for the time being. In other words, for my part in all this is I would not recommend that we treat general fund departments differently. You do this, you do that, and you come this way, and you send a note here, you call on the phone, all that. to me, that's not a good way forward.
Correct.
So we're not going there, as far as you know.
I agree that we're not going there. I think the difference is that there were so many unfilled positions in the sheriff's office. And there's one in community development and one in IS. So that's why it appears to be different, but the process is similar.
And it makes a difference where the sheriff's budget is the biggest budget in the general fund. It is
6%.
Yeah, no, 25.98% of the general fund budget. It does, it looks.
Okay, so, all right, Commissioner Yamamoto, do you have any issues on outstanding with other general fund or bill?
So I don't have a problem with it, because all the other department, and use that terminology, I don't use the terminology that Sean uses, but, you know, we've gone through and taken out the fluff, stuff that has never been spent in departments for years. Put it in contingency, and we have a list of all those contingent items. So I agree that we need to treat all departments the same. If we're going to go back to the sheriff now and put those things back in the budget, then all the other, we're going to have to work out a situation with all the other general fund departments also. And I don't know where we come up with all that money. Because again, we're required by law to have a balanced budget. We're not like the federal government who can just print money. Our budget must be balanced. And we have balanced our budget. But now we're considering putting those positions back in the sheriff's budget. And so therein lies the problem to me, is where does Sean now find the money to backfill, putting the deputies back in the sheriff's budget, even though we've assured the sheriff that no one on this committee wants to cut sheriff's positions, and we won't. But again, when you ask for a guarantee, that's impossible for the commissioners to do because of unforeseen circumstances. And again, that applies to any department. If we had to guarantee every position that's budgeted over the next fiscal year, something could happen. A pandemic could break out again. I don't know. And we would have to make some cuts somewhere. We would. Do I see that happening? No. But that's kind of the position we're in right now. So saying that all the general fund departments are going to be created equal, but some are more equal than others, therein lies my problem.
And I would agree. I would suggest perhaps communicating with department heads to ask if there's anything that they wish to have pulled from contingency, in the same way sheriff had things that he wished to have pulled from contingency, in the interest of creating a process that is the same. Because for me, this is about the process that was created, not about the sheriff, not about those pieces. It is just about, are we applying something consistently across our departments? And so that would be my concern, and I think my request would be, let's make sure that all departments head know that you don't have to fill the meeting room full of people who are upset about it to have a process to say, hey, this really isn't okay, here's why. So let's create a process which perhaps had we done that ahead of time, we wouldn't have had to be here. So again, in the interest of learning from all that has happened today, shall we provide a process and at least an email to department heads to suggest that if they have something they wish to have pulled from that contingency, to reach out to the treasurer's office and then come together again on a different date to balance the budget?
We could do that, yes.
Yeah, unless you guys got an easy answer for the sheriff's thing, and I don't see one. But I would go and have you guys go back to the drawing boards and come together next week and do this.
So the meeting's
Yeah.
Mike, you're gonna have to speak up. We can barely hear you.
I'd say I would be okay with postponing, going as far as we've gotten tonight. We know we got a problem, you got a perception problem with the community. we got a budget problem, how we're gonna fix it. Maybe we can sort that all out here in the next hour or so, maybe we
Great,
can
yeah.
convene in a few days or something, I don't know.
So it would have to be renoticed. It has to be noticed for at least 5 days in the paper
Yeah.
before, so it'd probably be about 2 weeks.
Well, 2
Unless
weeks.
Anybody has an opening on their calendar.
I guess we find a date. I'm leaving for Alaska in a couple of days. I won't be back around the 22nd or something like that. So if we did it then, and I guess the hard stop is June 30th. I mean, if we get something done, not imperative that it be done today. And I'm pretty good with that, and we could make it work for all of us. And perhaps these two would be back in town. You never know. But, so I guess I'd ask what is the pleasure, but what I'd like to is have one more conversation, maybe a short one, if we're going to push it off, about what do we do with the dilemma presented by the sheriff's office, and thinking about this through, if all the contingencies, well, that's the right, wait, let me say it again. If all the monies that are unexpended and have in some cases been unexpended for some period of time, and all the general funds were taken out, using the non-accounting term of Commissioner Yamamoto fluff, and put into another contingency, if you put it in dollar for dollar, how does that help the overall general fund? It seems to me if you're going to transfer them into another account, subject to control and putting it back, if you transfer it all, you have a net gain of 0. And so you'd have to say, well, okay, let's multiply by 0.75 or something like that and transfer that over, thereby realizing the savings to the general fund because you've been carrying all this extra money. Am I making some kind of sense?
You are. What we did is we had originally intended to complete the deposit to the Revenue Stabilization Fund, and that transfer was removed in lieu of placing funds into the contingency fund. So
And that was 1.8?
it was 1.3.
1.3, okay.
So it essentially, without a transfer to the Revenue Stabilization Fund, you could go ahead and hold those funds for what would be needed during the year and take whatever would remain at the end of the year and put it into revenue stabilization with the recognition and expectation that if it hasn't been spent in 5 years, 100% of it is unlikely to be spent.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. And so I guess if I look at it, if I back up to the 30 or 50,000 foot level of a macro approach, if the board wants cops, you're going to find a way to get cops and pay for them. If something else comes along, like being hacked and all of those things, and nobody can predict the future, you're going to find the money to do it. In the worst case, you'll borrow money, you'll restructure, and that's where we all need to have some confidence in the three of you that these things are going to happen. I'm personally less worried about the minutia where the money is than do we have the proper people in place to take care of the unforeseen. And I'm pretty comfortable with that, and I'm pretty comfortable that the county's not going to write a bad check. I don't think you ever have. Have you, Sean? Have you bounced a check lately?
I haven't, all last former treasurer died, if that ever happened.
When I took office, the general fund was in the red, $83,000.
So apparently we have written a bad check somewhere, way back in the future, way back in the past.
We transferred money from the road department and then paid it back. But yes, I've been in a deficit situation before.
Well, I'm being a little cavalier, but I think we can get totally absorbed in a swamp of minutia if we're not careful here. It seems to me it's pretty straightforward. If there's money over here and there's a method by which it can be put over here when it's needed, if it's needed, then I don't see much of an issue about talking about the details. That's almost more of an administrative function than a budget function. We say, we've got enough money to do what we're going to do. And where Sean hides it, or sticks it, or puts it in whatever drawer,
That's what we want to say.
Yeah. That's an administrative decision, maybe more than a budget committee, in my opinion only. And if we didn't have the confidence in our treasurer and the board to do what's right, and I haven't heard anybody say that hiring fewer cops is the right thing to do. It's just not. And nobody said that here that I've heard. So I guess the problem, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but if it's over here, over there, and we've got commitments on the record to pay for cops when they become available, I don't see much of a problem.
No, only if you ask permission for it.
Well, you know, I looked at the spreadsheet you did with, and treated each department equally, and they all took a little bite. But when you look at the sheriff's department, it's a huge bite.
Yep.
You've got a very public perception going on now that you're after them, and they're providing public safety to the community, and they need the support. You're gonna have to fix that.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to fix that somehow.
Yeah, this is Bill, and I agree. If you look at the general fund from 2013, there was a big cut back then, and the same with the sheriff's department. But as we move forward, the other departments filled back out. And if the sheriff's department had filled out at the same rate as the general fund in new hires, I think we would have been right around 50, 51 employees. So in effect, it wasn't fair to the sheriff's department overall. And I do think we need to go ahead and say, and kind of give Sean direction that we'd like to go ahead and fill all 11 positions.
Well, I think everybody will agree, the hiring in the sheriff's department is a most unique situation compared to any other type of employee you have. You know, and that's a national problem.
So the one thing I want to say, and I am not against this, and I'm sorry I have to keep being the one that speaks out, but as we have run projections to prepare for bargaining, and as we have looked at what will happen with all of our positions being full, we will run out of money. And it will be about a 2 to 3 year timeline. So I think I just want to be clear with the public as well, that we agree that we would love to be able to fill them all, and that we all need to agree that if it's a step we're taking this year to go ahead and make all 11 positions available and hope like heck they get filled, that in partnership with bargaining that's being done, in partnership with the wage study, the pay equity study, and even current increases, we will push ourselves to the edge if this timber thing happens the way that everyone is telling us now that it's really going to happen because of the IP. So I just want us to be, as Sean said in her budget message, aware, thoughtful. This isn't just about do we support law enforcement, it's also about will we ultimately be willing to pay more to have everything that we want as a county. Because we all want to have these things. And it's just being aware for the community that there will likely be an ask coming in the next 2 to 3 years for more revenue if we want to keep the services at the level that we are committing to today. So there is this forward thinking piece that Sean is asking us and the community to be aware of, that unfortunately we don't see a way that we're going to avoid if the world is going, in the direction. We've always talked about timber, but now we actually have an HCP and an IP sitting on the table that make the threat real. So now to say that we shouldn't fill them, please fill them with thoughtfulness. Please know that this is not going to be the end of the conversation. It'll just shift to a different conversation, which is superb. We fill them, how do we pay for them? Which we flipped it and said, how do we pay for them before we fill them? What I'm hearing is we want to fill them and then we'll figure out how to pay for them. Let's just all get ready for that next.
And I agree that what's coming in the next couple of years is very concerning. I totally agree with that. And I think the right thing to do is fill these positions now if we can. And if we hit that cliff where we have to reduce staff, then I would prefer to do it by attrition, because I can reasonably expect that we're gonna have turnover. We're gonna have people who move on to other jobs, people who retire. And if we have to hit a hiring freeze and say we can't add anybody back, that'll be sad, but we'll deal with it as it comes. And at least we would have those newer people on the job who have been trained, because it takes a long, long time to train a new deputy. It takes a long time to get them up to speed. At least we would have people in the pipeline who can replace the other folks as they leave. And I think we need to generate revenue. You're absolutely right. We need to generate revenue. We need to figure it out, and we've been talking about it, and now we need to accelerate that plan. And I also want to say, I think there's been a misunderstanding of a confusion about the idea of contingency because we haven't done it before. I was confused because when we talked about it in the last budget hearing, I thought that we were talking about things in people's budgets, not personnel. I thought we were talking about travel expenses or office supplies or whatever, things in budgets that were not personnel. And so when I discovered that we were including personnel and contingency, that was news to me and it was disturbing to me. And so I think if we were to take, if we take the sheriff's office positions out of contingency, we should also take the IS position and the community development position out of contingency. I think it's reasonable to have conversations about everyone that we're ready to hire. It's reasonable for the department heads to come to us and say, okay, we're ready to recruit for this position, we're ready to hire for this position, etc. All the time, like we did before, because we are in a serious budget situation. But I think the problem with, are we eliminating those? Are we moving those? What are we doing with those? Is it a shell game? It's because if we put them in contingency, they come out of the sheriff's budget. And us saying, well, we're not eliminating them is not very confidence inspiring because in fact they've come out of the sheriff's budget. So I just think we should leave them in the sheriff's budget.
And I think that's what we're leaning toward at this point. Okay?
Well,
Take us through the process. I think we're looking now at asking Sean to go back and find out how else do we balance the budget. If we don't use our contingency piece, what do we use? Are we just going to do a deficit budget, which using the 1.8 million, just to be clear, is a deficit budget. What it says is we are budgeting more expenses than we are budgeting revenue, and we will use an existing savings account to pay the difference. So whether that savings account is the 1.8, which is fine, I'm not attached to the annex. I think we have a project we have to figure out, or whether that's coming out of what has been in our beginning fund balance. But either way, if I understand correctly, it is using a savings account to pay current operating expenses. Am I correct?
Talking about abandoning the contingency plan for all the departments.
No,
Going
even
back
if
the
we
way
just
they did
do,
it before.
even if we just do it for the sheriff's department staff, we will still be under budget. We will still have to budget at a deficit. To Doug's point of how do we balance the budget, right? So you're still budgeting at a deficit. So what we're saying is the amount of revenue is here, the amount of expenses are here, and the way that we are able to show a balanced budget is we promise to take this amount out of our savings account, so to speak, to cover the expenses. Because we don't have enough revenue, but we're not ready to cut expenses. So we're going to borrow from our savings. We're going to use up, and I don't want to say borrow, we're going to use up savings account money to get us through the year because we don't have enough revenue. But it's okay because we have this amount of savings account money. That's what the projection is talking about. So if you go back to the budget message and you look at where she has Exhibit C, that shows you that process of moving forward, using our savings account to keep going at the level we're going today without adequate revenue. So that's where we are now, is that's the option that we have. And again, whether we use it out of the building fund or we use it out of the unappropriated beginning fund balance by giving ourselves permission to deficit spend and use it, that's what we're talking about. So the question is, what we're sending Sean back with is, don't cut, but we'd like you to figure out which savings account to pull it from and show that in the budget.
With pros and cons. If you do this, then you can't do that. If you do this, you do this thing, you can't do that, or vice versa. In other words, give us A, B, C, D, and pick out the least worst, for lack of a better term, of those. And then you end up balancing the budget. It seems to me too that of all the positions in the sheriff's office, I'm not sure you get them all filled in the next fiscal year. He sat up here and said we would, and he believes he will. And I'm as grateful as anybody that the market has changed and people are actually coming to work here, but wanting to come to work here. But the reality is, may not get all 11 or however many. And to me, that's a considered gamble that maybe if you get 9 out of 11, I'd call that pretty good, and then keep going for the other 2.
I'd be pleased with 6.
Yeah, it may be that, you don't know, but.
Yeah, but another thing you gotta remember, this is a budget. It's not actual money spent. People get confused. We're just playing around with numbers here. You take that money out and you balance up the budget, and the sheriff unfortunately doesn't hire anybody, none of that money's spent. It's in the budget, but he hasn't spent any of it, and then we start all over again next year and do whatever we're gonna do.
Correct, and then it's how much our savings account gets used up.
Yeah,
There's,
so what we have to do, like all municipalities, most businesses, you have to have a balanced budget going into the year. What you think's gonna happen? It's not necessarily the actual.
Which is why I suggested moving the money from the building improvement fund into contingency, because we're not anticipating spending all the money in contingency. We can't be anticipating spending that because we guaranteed the sheriff that if his positions went in contingency, we would cover them. So that means we anticipate that that money's gonna be in there. And I'm not suggesting that we spend the building improvement fund. I think we need it. But if we're just holding money in contingency, then let's hold the building improvement fund until we need it.
Can I say one thing? And I love the forward thinking and the thinking about the future. We're paying time and a half, 9,000 hours. We all know we need those 6 positions. We know they need probably 15 more cops on the streets. And I fully support that. But with this forward thinking, without an attrition and without more revenue, and you take away a planner and you take away a GIS coordinator, and I retire and my chief retires, and you don't fill those positions, then, you know, the timber is only 25% of the general fund. Taxes are 50% of the general fund. If we don't have the internal staff to do those jobs, to create that tax revenue, then there's not money to go around also. So this is a very complicated issue, and I love the forward thinking, and the library is going to we're already paying time and a half for these overtime hours.
That's a key part of this, 9,000 hours equates to a whole bunch of money that could be spent otherwise. So I guess what I'm hearing now is we're all in agreement there'd be some money moved back into the sheriff's budget, perhaps a couple of others, and we'll kick that over to Sean to do that. And then you need to find a date around the 23rd, 24th, 25th or something where we can come back for an hour or two and see if you can schedule it at 1 instead of 3. And not to, or whatever. Do it, I don't care.
right, so people can participate. Everybody had to leave though, because they were the afternoon people.
I don't care, just find a time through your scheduling mechanism that works for everybody. And we'll do it, and at that point then we'll consider your recommendations based on what you've heard, and we'll be looking at a balanced general fund budget. And we don't need that, since we're not going to take the next step, then we're not gonna read any of the tax rates until we actually conclude it. So, I'll just make one other comment now, and I've said this before, and somehow the county, you gotta look at another source of revenue, maybe for law enforcement, of some kind of a law enforcement, either a serial levy or, I don't think you do a tax base separately without removing it from the general fund, probably not. But in lots of places I've funded with the 5-year serial levy, and there's been a lot of success stories in Tillamook County, starting with the library a number of years ago, and look what the college has done, look what the Stuckhouse schools, look what else is on the ballot today. We've had a whole lot more successes than failures across the county. And, that's a long-term thing, and I know you talk about that all the time, and you talk about levies for one thing or another, but, law enforcement probably has as much or more support than any other thing the county does, is my opinion. But, so it might not be as difficult to sell, but then if it were to fail, then you can always say, and this would be a terrible thing to say, but, we tried, you didn't support us, what's next? You get the voters an opportunity to say, yeah, law enforcement means something to us, and I'm willing to open my checkbook.
I'll tell you what though on that, if I may.
Yes, please do.
I'll read it to you, Mr. Attorney, just that, I know a few years ago, there was a push to increase the tax base down in Pacific City and Nescoin to get a South County deputy, and we all voted no. And I think, I actually voted no, and I'm former law enforcement. I was law enforcement at the time, and the reason was because I just know how it works. I knew that there'd be a deputy sitting up at Long Prairie Road working on reports and possibly responding to other things, and not necessarily be able to get down to Nescoin, which is actually 45 minutes from the courthouse, 40 if you're not stuck behind any RVs. Trust me, I do this drive twice a day, every day, so I know. And so, yeah, that's a big problem there because we know, we're already complaining, everybody complains about how much money we're already paying on our taxes. One thing that, I don't know, this isn't, clearly not something we solved in the budget meeting, but for this forward-thinking concept, the thing I've noticed from being in law enforcement, I've been in Tillamook County going on 7 years, and I worked for the state police for the first 4, and I've been at the DA's office, I was with the state police for 4 years, but 3 years in Tillamook County, and in the last 4, I've been at the DA's office. And I don't have an actual spreadsheet to show you what the numbers are. I want to find time to create one, but I just know from my own experience that it's tourism that increases our need for our public safety officials. That's everything that the sheriff's office does, everything criminal anyway. All these, every death case, every unattended death case, we review it. I'm involved in all sorts of stuff you have no idea we're involved in, and I cannot. A large percentage of it is from people who visit this county, and there's got to be another way to get more money out of those tourism dollars to put back into our public safety fund.
Guys, that can be addressed.
We all agree.
I know
We'd
it's
all
not
love
good,
to
but-
see it. Yeah, we'd all love to see it addressed. It's been attempted at the state level multiple times with the TLT, and I'm sure it will be attempted again. And I think that's the challenge. Other counties have looked at other taxes. The sheriff has brought forward examples of other taxes that other counties have looked at. Most recently, was it Jack's, one of them that went after Josephine, and it didn't pass, unfortunately. City of Tillamook tried to do something that was just during the high points, right? Just when tourists were really here on their gas tax, and that didn't go. And it's really challenging because we would all like to be able to have the services needed by the industry funded by the industry. And we haven't found a mechanism that makes that possible.
Bill and I talked about it just recently when he came to my office and because Bill tried it when he was in office and I think Josh and I should try it again. We should take another run at it because Bill was talking about had COVID not happened, he had a plan for inspiring a whole bunch of sheriffs and firefighters, fire chiefs to sponsor that bill with him. And if you could have had a statewide roadshow, sheriffs and fire chiefs could have made a bigger impression. And we talk about Orla, and we know they're a powerful lobbying force to be reckoned with. But I think that this conversation is probably being had all over the state, and eventually I think that could be successful. And so we need to work on it sooner rather than later. And I bet the sheriff and I could join forces and work on that.
I'd be happy to be involved in that.
Thank you.
Because my office is directly impacted by this.
Yes.
As I wrote a letter to legislators recently that 2 out of 3 of the murders we are currently prosecuting were committed by visitors to our county.
Yeah.
Right.
I can't say that that's the exact rate for all of our crimes, but I know, there's a high percentage of our caseload, our workload, that's being committed by out-of-towners.
Well, it's an uphill climb because I used to be in that business for 20-some years, and I was in the OR, Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association, and I remember Wasco County tried to readjust what they spent the money on from the TLT, and it was a matter of a few weeks, and they had a summons and complaint from Orla. And they lost. And so, you know, the forces that will argue against this are quite powerful and well-funded, and, you know, it's not no climb, but you don't quit, and then maybe it's time to go again, and, you know, and I've always believed in the power of people, you know, eventually, you know, if you know, even if you start with a small shovel, you can dig a hole.
And a beach passed a 2% food and beverage tax.
There you go.
And there's other cities in Oregon that have, you can get them that way. Because they come down here to visit and spend their money, and then they expect us to take care of them.
Right.
And they
Well,
should
and how
pay
do we
their
draw the
way.
line, you know, I mean, we're always questioning, how do we draw the line on what the sheriff's office will respond to and what they won't?
No, I think that's a
What
good
we
point.
prosecute and
Yeah.
what we don't.
Yeah, the sheriff was talking at one of our board briefings about how many calls they take to unattended second homes. People who aren't there, but their alarm goes off, and so then law enforcement is dispatched to go check it out. That's huge. One of the pieces of, that I have on my desk is a vacancy tax that is in Vancouver, BC, and it's for the homes where the people aren't living there. You know, maybe that's a piece, right?
But
Can
if
we
somebody
get that
breaks
through
in
the
and
state?
steals something from that unattended home, is a burglary one, which is a class A felony, which is prison time.
Right, and
We
if-
want to prosecute them.
We do, and if they were paying a vacancy tax that was paying for us to have officers to be able to respond and do that, when you think about 51% of our tax bills go out of county right now, 51%. That's when you're thinking about vacant homes and the impact not only short-term rentals have and day visitors have, but our vacant homes. And that's where I'm certain a lot of these alarms are going off, but they're not paying, right, the
Well,
extra.
and vacant homes
And they don't
are,
vote.
and vacant homes are much more likely to be
don't get
targeted,
it.
Right,
because
and vacant-
nobody's there.
Vacant homes like to be
My
targeted.
home's not being targeted, because I've
There you
got
go.
a land shark who's protecting it.
Yeah. So sorry, Doug, we got a little off track.
Sorry.
We did, okay. So where we're going is items number 7, 8, and 9, and 10 for that matter. We're going to push forward, although we will adjourn here in a moment. But so you're going to find, John, a time the last week of May, give or take, where we can find a couple of.
Perfect.
You have Wednesdays blocked out, and they just take up all your Wednesdays.
Okay, and then you will have a balanced budget, taking into account what you've heard today, and if there's any questions, you can talk to any one of us, and we'll figure out something, and the only guarantee we'll have is a budget by July 1, we hope.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you all.
All right, so with that, at 6:15.
Sheriff, can I talk to you before you leave, please?
Oh, yes.
Not in this meeting, after this meeting. Not
Okay.
for the world.
Okay, we're going to adjourn at 6:15 to reconvene, reset, we're gonna recess.
Oh, okay,
Correct,
so it
that's
is.
correct. We're gonna recess to reconvene in time to be set up towards the end of May to continue our work.
Thanks.